Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Gregg Wooldridge with me. Gregg is the only three-time captain of the Blue Angels, and he is a great speaker and has many different topics that he covers. But one of the things that I think you're going to hear about his story is how, as a leader, you have to have confidence and competence, but you also have to make sure others are served before yourself. And so excited to highlight that in his journey. So, Gregg, thanks so much for being on today.
Thanks, Phil. Glad to be here. Pleasure to have this opportunity. Yeah, the opportunities that arise in life, you really have to go after them, and sometimes you have to be, kicked in the rear to go after them, or encouraged by people you trust, and that's been kind of my case. Seeing things though, I also will do things that are kind of out of the norm,
Yeah.
like running for office or making a movie or whatever. You have to just grasp the wonderful opportunities we have in life.
I love it. Yes. So to start off your journey, you said, "Hey, I didn't necessarily know growing up I was going to go into the Navy or I was going to get into aviation." You said, probably as a young kid, the closest I came to flying was throwing some, created planes off of a tower in Cincinnati. But talk a little bit about, growing up and just some of the passions you had as a kiddo.
Yeah, that's a great question because when I was growing up, I wasn't stellar in academics, but I still got through high school, which was good. No great goals in my mind at that point. A lot of us we kind of flounder in the high school and not really sure what we're going to do. And then I thought about college, but I knew I didn't have my family didn't have the money and I didn't have the grades. But my mom insisted that I be, a college student and graduate because it hadn't happened in our family before. So off I went, and she drove me around Central Illinois, found a little college that had a work study program, and I entered school on academic probation. Uh, Even into the second semester, but I had a second chance. Second chances are big in this world, and
Yes.
I got to experience quite a few. So I had a second chance to finish school, and I did. And then I wanted to go serve my country, and I wanted to do it in a way that I could learn a trade. And I know this sounds corny, that, well, you must have wanted to fly, you know, Navy jets all your life. Well, no, I wanted to get in the Navy and learn a trade that would serve me well. And I thought, oh, what if I learned to fly? What about that great opportunity? And I did that, and I got in and had some troubles along the way, meeting the goals, and got a second chance when it came to carrier qualifications, on the ship, at night and day landing.
Yeah.
Second chance there. And I had a great instructor that he advised me, hey, come on, Gregg, you fly the airplane. Don't let it fly you. And you know what? Take that adage and apply it to anything in life. You fly the airplane. If you've got an opportunity, if you've been selected to do something, it's because you're seen as someone who has the experience, the knowledge, the talent, the skill to get it done. Now take it on, grab it and say, all right, I'm not going to have these little off course deviations. I'm going to drive this right down the middle and make it happen, and fly that airplane, take control, and use those skills that I have to make it happen. I've used that all my life. So that's a long lead into to your question.
No, I love it. So to rewind a little bit on that, I know you said, "Hey, when I got into the Navy, receiving your wings was the big deal, and you were excited about that." But the excitement of having the opportunity to fly was quickly, I would say, brought down a little bit from the sounds of it, because you were told, well, you're going to actually teach people. And you're like, well, what the heck? I wanted to be the one flying. So talk a little bit about that. You feel like, gosh, I just got to where I was, aspiring to get to. And now I'm getting told I'm going to be doing something different.
When I got my wings, Phil, it was there was a period of training where they trained too many pilots. What I'd hoped to do, getting my wings in what we call the jet pipeline, getting trained and learning to fly jets. I thought, okay, I want to go to the fleet. I want to be at the cutting edge, the pointy end of the spear, if you will. They said, well, we have way too many pilots. We don't have any seats available. So we're going to send you back to the training command to teach young men. At that time, we didn't have ladies in the military, which is great that we do now.
Yeah.
In the aviation, it's great that we do now. So to teach, and it was not in jets. It was in propeller-driven airplanes. The first plane people fly in the Navy, and that's what I did for 2.5 years. And you know what? It was super good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Seeing and getting the satisfaction of teaching somebody to do something. Wow.
Yeah.
And I can understand why teachers get so much joy out of teaching. It was just it was really good. I learned a lot, and from there did pretty well. So I got to finally get my fleet seat, what we call a fleet seat, flying, the advanced airplanes that the Navy flies off, aircraft carriers.
Yeah. Well, I want to highlight that though, because I think so frequently it's easy to have that happen, right? The thing you were shooting for, the thing you were aspiring for, it doesn't quite work out the way in your mind it was going to work out. And then a different opportunity presents itself. And at that moment in time, you have a choice to make, right? Am I going to take that opportunity and say, it's not the thing I wanted, but if I excel at that, there could be something I'm not even aware of that comes to me? Or am I going to be pissed off about it and not do my best? And all of a sudden, maybe the next opportunity doesn't come around as quickly, or the next opportunity isn't the one that was intended based on that role. So talk a little bit about, having the mindset of, all right, it's not exactly where I want to be, but I'm just going to excel the best I can in the role I've been given, and let the chips fall where they may from there.
It's all about bringing up people around you, for one thing. If you do your absolute best, and you take that opportunity to say, you know what, I'm gonna charge ahead with this. Here I am. This is maybe not where I exactly wanted to be, but doggone it, I'm gonna make the absolute best of this opportunity and challenge myself. If it's not the type of flying that I thought would be challenging, I'm going to challenge myself to do it the best I possibly can. And by doing that as a teammate in a squadron, it elevates the performance of everybody around you. So yes, you could get down in the mouth about it and go, okay, I'll just muddle through here and see what happens next. Well, it doesn't do you any good, and it doesn't do anybody around you any good.
Yes, that's so good. Now, you mentioned second chances are an important part of life, and flying had no different life lesson than the second chance. And so you mentioned you were, I think, learning to fly the A7, and the first time it just didn't go quite as one would hope or as planned. And the second time, the instructor slowed you down and gave you some important words, and the outcome was different the second time. So one, talk a little bit about the first experience, and then two, talk a little bit about the change coming through on the second time.
Yeah, well, the first time I thought I was doing pretty well. In fact, I got the requisite number of landings, 10 in the daytime and 6 at night, on this small decked aircraft carrier, smaller than the standard aircraft carriers at the time. And I thought I had done okay. And at the end of it, my instructor at that point said, look, it's just not the quality we need. And I thought maybe they were going to drop me out of the program. And they said, but we're going to assign you another instructor. And that's what they did. And that's when he told me about, you fly the airplane. Don't let the doggone thing fly you. Excuse me, just. So I thought, wow, I get a second chance, All right. And I had a great instructor at the time, and he's the one that advised me, if it's, don't let the airplane go left or go right or up or down where you don't want it to go. You take control. You have the skill to get this done. And that challenge and that guidance really motivated me. Really, I wanted to succeed for myself, but I also wanted to succeed for my instructor. So for those around you, when you can be an example of their success, my goodness, it was really terrific.
That's really good. And as I hear you say that, don't let the plane fly you, you need to be in control of where you want to go. I think of the phrase, my response is my responsibility, right? So, we're talking about in the context of flying a plane, but, you think about life and you say, well, life is going to happen, but the reaction that I have to what happens in my life is up to me. I don't, yeah, necessarily get to control if the wind's blowing this way or if the wind's blowing that way. I just control where the plane continues to navigate. And similarly in life, right? I don't necessarily get to control if I get a flat tire driving home today, but I get to control my response to the flat tire that happens in my life.
Right, right. Absolutely. So that's the way you got to go at it. I had a couple other things in life that were setbacks, and I got second chances, and every one of them turned out better than I could have imagined.
I love it. So I guess a question on that, and we're going to dive into a few of these topics, but a question would be, how does one not lose confidence in attempting it a second time if the first time didn't go quite right, right? How do we maintain a level of, all right, I believe in myself, and maybe it's people around you that are pouring into you saying, Greg, you can still do it. What would be your advice there?
I would say find a trusted advisor, get a hold of a good friend. I think what you said about people around you, oh my goodness, if you have not performed to your own expectations, and it would be easy, just like getting assigned to the a propeller instructional job, where it would be easy to get down in the mouth and go, I can't do that, so I better look at something else, even though that was my goal. That was what I really wanted to do. If you can find someone, and that happened to me a lot, like when I applied for the Blue Angels to be the flight leader, I looked at the requirements. I looked at the people that were applying. I said, I will never get this job. But the young folks around me said, I was a skipper. I was a commanding officer of a squadron. They said, Skipper, you've got to do this. You would be great. And I said, they'll never pick me. And I started thinking, if you have an opportunity and you don't challenge yourself to take it and then to do the absolute best you can, you never know. You will never know the rest of your life whether that opportunity was meant for you and whether you were going to succeed at it. I carry in my wallet a card from a mentor of mine. Let me dig it out. It may take me a second. It's a quotation that I think is just really superb. It's from Mark Twain. He says, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore and dream. I mean, I've got it right here on my wallet.
That's so good.
You know what? So that's it. You'll never know. 20 years from now, you'll never know what you could have done if you don't challenge yourself to take that opportunity. And I've had that happen to me a lot. And back to the original premise, and that is, do you just get down in the mouth, or how do you get motivated to continue and take this thing and excel at it? And I think a lot of times it has to do with the people around you. I mean, I was turned down after I retired from the Navy. I was turned down the first time. I hadn't thought about this in a while, but the first time I applied to fly at FedEx, I was turned down.
Wow.
And so here I am, a 3-time leader of the Blues, and I go, okay, well, I guess that's not for me. And I had someone encourage me, saying, look, that was a bad week. You had a lot of issues when you were doing your military job that were distracting you. So give it another try. And I did, and I got on with FedEx. So that, yes, it's good. It's great to have people that support you.
Yes. Well, and to your point, you mentioned it. So the opportunity, the Blue Angels list a job, and you, to your point, like you mentioned, said, I wouldn't be the right guy, but people encourage you to do so. And so you were over in Japan at that time, and they flew you and I believe it was 5 others to Corpus Christi to do the interview process. So talk a little bit about that, because obviously the other 5 people that they flew in probably weren't, anything to snuff at, right? I mean, they're probably pretty high echelon individuals as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was the only guy that came in from Japan. In fact, I was on the carrier. We were doing an exercise, and they said, now you need to come and interview. And the rest of the interviewees, the rest of the candidates for the job were in the stateside. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go back there. I was in Japan. I hadn't had any really good Mexican food. I said, I can't wait to get back there in Corpus Christi, of course. I said, I'm just going to relax and have a good time, especially when I saw the competition. One of the guys that applied for the team lead was the commanding officer of Top Gun.
Oh, wow.
I'll never have a chance, And then there was another guy that was doing flight demonstrations in the F-14 at the time. He was just he looked like the ideal candidate to lead the Blue Angels. So I was just I wasn't acquiescing to losing, but I thought, you know what? No matter the outcome, I'm going to enjoy this time. I'm going to be myself. I'm not going to be on pins and needles.
Yeah.
If I don't get selected, I've had the opportunity to come back to the States for a little while. And at the same time, one of the things I did was we didn't we didn't have emails then, so we had to rely on another messaging system. And I looked, there was a communications center right there where I was interviewing in Corpus, and it gave me the opportunity to go over there and see how my troops were doing, the people that worked for me, who I'm always trying to grow, help them grow, learn to be better at what they're doing, and maybe some of them even someday to take my job. That's what I'm always shooting for.
Yeah.
So I kept going over there to see how they were doing in the promotion process, right? Getting the messages from Washington. And somebody saw me do that, and I thought, wow, there's a guy that really cares for the people that work for him, And I think, and I didn't do that to have that effect. It was kind of just part of how I approached the whole process. But I got selected. I don't know why, but I did. So what can I say?
So talking about that, and I guess there's kind of two things I want to follow up on. One is you just mentioned I cared so much about the people that were working with me, that, even when I was away, I wanted to check in on them, and it got noticed. And I think too frequently people forget that, right? When you're just authentically, a genuine leader, and you're trying to care about the people that you work with, people notice that because it's not common, right? Well, what we would think would be common sense is not always common practice to folks. And so, talk a little bit about, authenticity and just being the leader that you are, and putting others first above, maybe even yourself at times.
Yeah, one thing I might harken back to is, as a child, I was a skinny bucktooth kid, right? So humility has been a part of my life all my life.
Yeah.
I am one humble dude, and I always was. And I think what that gave me was an appreciation for being in that position of not being looked on as a star
Yeah.
or the best, and having that empathy for others that might be in that same category, but others with skills and talents and potential that you can develop, right? And you look at yourself and go, wow, I was just how did I get to do that? And how can I help others to achieve a higher level of performance, or a higher level of integration into a team in a situation. So that upbringing and early life led me to think a little differently. I think perhaps that's part of it. I don't know. I'd have to have a psychologist, I guess, figure that part out. Anyway.
Absolutely. Now, the second part is, I mean, how exciting, one, that you then are named captain, but two, I'm sure that was a great example for the people on your team, right? Because they were the ones that had to encourage you to even apply for the darn thing when you didn't necessarily believe you could. And I would imagine somewhere deep in their mind that triggered something that, hey, someday I might not feel like I'm capable or like I'm the best person, but I remember when, Skip did it, or I remember when Gregg did it, and maybe that could be me. So once again, your actions led by, an example as well. So talk a little bit about that as leadership also.
Yeah, well, that's a really great question. It's one to really dig deep into, Phil. I think if, we don't push forward totally thinking about what impact you'll have on others. We think about taking the bull by the horns and going after something, right? But what you said was excellent, and that is that those around you see someone reaching out, even though it looks like an unachievable goal, reaching out and pushing forward to get there. And that's an example to set. Well, you said that wonderfully. Thank you.
You bet. Well, thank you. You're the example. So as you get a part of the Blue Angels and kind of the elite flying crew that it is, one thing that really stood out to me that probably explains why it's so good is you mentioned that daily after flying you would do a debrief
Mhm.
and you would talk through a few different topics. So talk a little bit about what that debrief looked like, and once again, people listening, we're talking about in the scope of flying airplanes, but I think this can help you in your personal life. I think it can help you in your business life. So there's a lot of themes that transcend here.
Certainly, certainly. That's what I talk about in my keynotes a lot. And I think it's a secret sauce to achieving a higher level of performance as an organization, as an enterprise, as a team. And the way we did it was instead, we had a debrief every time we flew. So a lot of times, even the word debrief has a negative connotation, right? Oh boy, we better debrief this, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, and Bob and George and Fred and Sue and Mary, how did you really screwed that up? You got to fix that. No, we debriefed everything because it was an opportunity to learn and grow
Hmm.
and get to the correct answer to what was challenging us. So different. I went into the room. I was the lead goose, if you will. That was my squadron, the Blue Angels, and there was nobody else in the room that could quotes, air quotes, hammer us, right? So we were our own critics.
Yeah.
So, I went into the debrief we had flown either a practice or a show, and it didn't matter whether it was a practice or a show. We did the same intensity of a debrief. I would go in as the lead and say, okay, general impressions, it was a rough day out there. The winds and the turbulence was tough to deal with, but I think we did okay. But here are my mistakes. Here are what we called safeties. Here are my safeties. This is where I could have done better. I was 100 feet low at the cross or whatever, and I'll fix that. So there's, first of all, transparency, accountability, responsibility, and the promise in building trust. So trust, the big T word, trust was built by you ensuring those around you that you were going to fix that. Now, what would a leader in a normal organization do? Probably not say those things about how he or she had faltered, but point out, hey, George, tell me about that one move you made. That was all screwed up,
Yep.
right? So what we've done is, and then it goes from me to one of the wingmen, and we had a specific procedure, a specific route in that to start saying what they had been challenged with, what their safeties were. Because in flight with that arena, it's everything's pretty much a safety issue if you
Yeah.
don't do it exactly right. These were my safeties, and I'll fix them. Glad to be here. So glad to be here was at the end of each of our recitations of our shortcomings. Glad to be here. A reset, right? It was beautiful. So everybody did that, and we never had to point at someone and say, why did everything came out, full transparency. I used to say we drove out fear. What I like to say now is we dissolved fear. There's
Mm,
no fear in discussing what you have done and how you're going to get better at it.
yeah.
It's a long process.
No, I think that's so good. And I think one of the things that, I hear you say when you're talking about leading or being the leader and being the one to tee off and say, hey, here's what I could have done better is one, it shows that you're human, right? Hey, just like each and every one of you, there was something that I could have done better.
Exactly.
But two, I'm willing to own up to it and not place blame on anyone else. And I think that makes the people, I'm using the term below, but the people, that are not the leader by title, feel comfortable, right? Saying, hey, well, if the leader can say that, I can also say what I did wrong. Whereas to your point, in a lot of organizations, they point out what you did wrong. And then you're like, well, the last thing I want to do is admit anything more that I did wrong.
Right, right. That's fear of loss of job, loss confidence from the others around you,
Yeah.
degradation of the trust. When you're flying 18 inches apart at 400 miles an hour with that 22-ton jet, you have to have an extremely high level of trust. And the way you get to that is from each and every teammate, no matter whether they're flying, fixing the jets, whatever they're doing, to have that accountability and the transparency that allows them to share without fear. And that's what made that, it made the search for excellence constant, and from those revelations, from what you did and how you promised to get better, now you're going to improve the whole, it goes into improving the whole squadron. So like when we started out flying in the start of the air show season, we'd be at 36 inches apart.
Yes.
By mid-season, midway through the 9 months, 10 months that we flew together as a demonstration team, about halfway through, we could say, you know what, we did pretty well today. What do you guys think about closing it down to 18 inches in some of these maneuvers? So we changed our beliefs and what we could do. And we never operate any higher in life than what our beliefs are. So if you can elevate your beliefs, in yourself, and then elevate the beliefs in the team, everybody's performance is gonna rise.
I think that's so good, and I love that you shared that story. So to give context, yeah, when these guys are flying, there's 36 inches between them, and over time they get closer and closer. And one day you were watching some footage, as I understand it, and you said, "Gosh, why the heck are you guys so close to me?" And they had an answer for you.
That's right. They said, "Boss, we trust you." And
Mm,
oh my gosh, and that's what develops when you use this way of doing business. You develop that trust. I talk about the C's of trust, the words that begin with C: consistency, competence, commitment, right? All those three are huge. The biggest one is, and character. Character is
yeah,
the fourth one. The biggest one is consistency.
yeah.
If you're not consistent in how you fly, how you lead, the way you make decisions, and I'll always say it's not really making the same decision, but using the same values that people trust you to hold in making those decisions, that keeps that trust at a high level.
I love it. Now, I had a gentleman on the podcast. His name is Rich Davini, and he was a Navy SEAL. And post being a SEAL, he actually was the one that would select who got in, and then he would create the pods. So, a question I have for you is, as the captain, were you in charge of getting to select the different individuals that would join the team? And then question number two is, how the heck do you do that? I'm sure you have a lot of amazing candidates. So similar to you getting selected out of 6 amazing people, how do you go about picking the right person?
That was a unique way we did business too, Phil. One of the things we did, and not one of the things, the main thing we did was pick our own people, right? So people would apply to the team.
Yeah.
Some were known by the current team members, some weren't. We'd look at their applications, we look at the endorsements they got, and then we'd pick finalists and have them come in. It wasn't me that picked them. It was the whole team.
Yeah.
And the team looks at the personality of the person. And in the culture that we had, the glad to be here culture and the culture of trust, we wanted to pick people that we knew would fit that mold. So that's why everybody on the team, and there were 16 officers on the team, and we picked the new officers every year. It's about a 50% turnover, if you can believe that, because it was only a 2-year tour because of the intensity of it. But we picked our own people, and any one of those 16 members, officers of the team, could say what we called no way on that person. And even if I said, no, we got to have that person. No, if one person said no way, then they weren't picked. And so by getting unanimity, is that the word?
Yeah.
On selection, right? Everybody had buy-in and had ownership of that outcome of selecting that person. So it was different from what the SEAL team fellow did, but it was a smaller group, and it was our own team. So we picked our own teammates, not like most commands where somebody in Washington looks at a record and says that's the person for you.
Yeah.
We got to interview and then select our own people.
Well, I mean, you think about, I'm a big sports guy, right? So I think about sports and you say there's been a lot of really talented guys that get signed or they get traded for, and then they go to the team and it doesn't work out. And to your point, it's probably because there's a little bit of a culture and a character, flaw there, right? The talent, you can be the most talented person, but if you're not about the team, or if you're, not making the right choices for the unit as a whole, it just doesn't turn out the way that one would have hoped.
Right, right. And it doesn't even have to be a flaw in their character. It's not a character that molds well with the character of the team. Now, every year there's a slight bit of difference in the teams and
Yeah.
how they believed and the culture they lived in, how we bolstered that culture. It changed every year a little bit. So we tried to pick people that matched up with where we're going with the team. One of the things I led the team with when I first got there was a kinder, gentler Blue Angel team, which meant as ambassadors of goodwill, we needed to exude love for the people around us, the people that we got to meet. And
Yeah.
that was crucial. And if we saw any glimmer of, and it wouldn't be glimmer, wouldn't be any spark of somebody not being in that mode on the teams that we led, that we had, then they probably weren't going to be a good fit.
That's very good. Now, a second thing that I think of as I hear, growing a team dynamic is, as a leader of the team, there's one title that gives you the official leader status, but typically there are other people that are just leaders, but maybe don't have the same title. And how do you bring those leaders up with you and prepare them, or, give them delegating duties or powers, so that way, one, it frees you up for other things, but two, it also, motivates them and gives them a sense of, all right, my leadership qualities are being noted.
Yeah. When we developed that trust, it gave us the opportunity to empower those around us, right?
Mm.
And some of the best corporations, I point to Enterprise Rent-A-Car, I see their teammates there are empowered to make on the spot decisions, and you get that through trust, training, tools, all those things that are really good. So with me, it was like, all right, I trust you, and I'm going to give you the power to make decisions because I want you to see that we can be held accountable, but we shouldn't fear that accountability. We should embrace it, right? And embrace that opportunity to move ahead in life. I always wanted to develop those around me to take my job, right? I wanted them to feel like, and one of the things I did late in my command tours was to actually not turn down fun opportunities and give them to somebody else. I would sometimes take them myself, right?
Yeah.
Like we got to fly off the ship one time and land in Bahrain and just go shopping for a day or whatever. And I said, well, you know what? I could give that to somebody else, but I want people to see that it is actually fun to command. It's fun to lead. It's fun to
Yeah.
have that responsibility. Now, as a commander or as a CEO or an executive, a C-suite person, wherever you are, even down in the lower, the lower supervisory positions, you have to know that you have to show that it's fun. If you're always running around with your head hanging low, people are going to say, well, I never want to have that job, right? But I was a benefactor of having so many wonderful leaders above me, and see that, and learn that initially you start watching, you go, boy, I would never want to do that. And then as you grow, you say, you know what, I think I might have done that differently. And yeah, maybe someday I could do that because I'm beginning to see how that would work. But you learn and you pick up leadership traits from those that lead you, the things that match your personality. And you kind of have to discard the ones that, so I love jokes, but I can't tell a joke. So I loved when people could tell, my bosses could tell a great joke. I couldn't. So I had to pick up on other ways to motivate people.
I love it. Now, you mentioned, hey, it's a 2-year term that you get to serve,
Right.
and so that comes and goes. Great opportunity, great experience. You go back to work, and then a gentleman gets asked to step down from the position, and the phone rings, and they say, "Hey, Greg, you've done it once. You're pretty good at it. Maybe we'll have you do this again." So,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about opportunity number two, or time number two coming around.
Yeah. The second time when I got called back the first time, it was a lot of controversy about why the fellow that had relieved me got set aside. lots of controversy. So I was, when I got asked, I said, you know what, I think it stinks, to
Yeah.
put it bluntly, that he has to step down. But if that's what we need to do, and it hadn't been that long since I had led the team, I'll come back, but I hope we can get this resolved quickly, so the team can keep flying now with me coming back, but get the other gentleman back in. So I was, and it took me off course from my career. I was going to go to Spain and command a base over there. It took that opportunity away from me, which was fine because I got to do something equally as satisfying and important, I guess you might say. But that's how I got called back the first time. And the way I approached it was, I'm gonna give these folks everything I can give them, and ask that of them in return with this hiccup that we've now experienced on the Blue Angels, and we're going to press ahead and excel like we always do.
So when you come back and you do something a second time, you have all the experience of time number one, but you also lose a little bit of the newness excitement of something because you've been there, you've accomplished that before. And so how did you, approach it with as much excitement and vigor as the first time, even though it was something you'd already done? But also, what were certain things that you did a little bit differently on time number two that you're like, all right, if I got this opportunity again, or if I could have restarted time number one, maybe I would have started doing these things earlier.
Yeah. I was a lot more relaxed,
Yeah.
frankly. Even though I had been out of the cockpit 6 months, I was relaxed, and I saw this as a challenge that could really help the Navy. And that motivated me tremendously, and it would really help the folks on the team, the current team. That was invigorating as it could possibly be. I just went after it to make the team as good as it can be. And it's a exemplar of Navy and Marine Corps service is the Blue Angels, and we need to accept that as a great challenge and a great responsibility. And so I did, and I did what I told you I did a little earlier, and that's I took advantage of some of the things I wouldn't have done before because I felt like, okay, I've got a pretty good handle on this. Now I can go jump in. So one of the things I did, it was a guy that had a jet powered truck at one of the air shows. A great guy, Les Shockley, and he said, "Why don't you come and fly with me?" So as soon as I got done with, or not fly, ride with me in my jet truck.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have done it in the past, but I got done with the flight demonstration, and I asked the guys on the team, do you mind if I go do that right now instead of, and then we'll debrief. They said, no, go ahead, boss, go do that. So anyway, I felt like I could take a little more leeway that way.
Yeah. Now, as you also get a third time to do this, you got a very prestigious award on your third opportunity where you ran the premier naval air station in California, and it was selected the best naval base in the entire world. I don't know what all goes into that, but I know if you're the best at anything in the entire world, you did something right. So talk about getting that honor. And once again, it takes more than one person to do that, but just talk a little bit about the honor that you received there.
Well, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So the people that had led the base before me had done a great job, and a lot of things were on track already. It was just up to us, me and my team, to keep pushing that forward.
Yeah.
And I think we were just the benefactors of that great planning and the people ahead of us that had created a great environment. And what I did too was take the Blue Angel model of debrief to that command, and that helped a lot. But I had really great people on my team that did a marvelous job, and that's how we got there.
Now, anytime you've excelled and you've been in the, top 1% or top 0.1%, whatever you would have been categorized as, and the time with that comes to an end, I think it's a lot of times people have their identity in a role, right? They have their identity in the team atmosphere, whatever it is, and all of a sudden that ends. And for a lot of people, it kind of becomes this wandering of, man, what am I supposed to do now? Or where does the meaning from the work that I'm doing now come from? Talk a little bit about your transition out of the Navy and into civilian lifestyle, and not being a Blue Angel flyer anymore, but saying, yeah, I did do that, and now I'm progressing on to the next thing.
Well, it motivated me to continue to try new things and not to be fearful of them. I had a lot of, as you might imagine, a lot of good contacts
Yeah.
after the Blues, and they gave me a lot of opportunity. My humility, how can you say you were humble and still be called humble? But my, I didn't expect that I would be, open. I would have doors open to me, wide open. I knew I'd have to still prove myself,
Yeah.
and that always drove me. And when I got out of the Navy, there were a couple of things I wanted to do, and I needed to prove myself. But I wasn't going to rest on my laurels
Mm,
that I'd felt when I led the team.
that's great. Now, just thinking back on the time with the Blue Angels, I'm sure there's a gazillion amazing memories, but is there any one or two, flights or people that flew for, got to meet after a flight that really stick out to you?
Yeah, we got to meet a lot of high profile folks,
Yeah.
athletes, actors, actresses, politicians, going into the Oval Office and meeting with the president. That was pretty cool. But I think it was just the average Joe and Jane out there that really made me proud to get to do what I got to do, and honored to get to do what I got to do. The fella standing at the chain link fence, holding the fence with his fingers and looking at you with his bib overalls on and tears coming down
Mm,
his face from what he had just seen. That it was that kind of experience with having, again, the honor to make that kind of impact. I think that was the biggest thing for me.
I love it. Now, as you're transitioning into life post Blue Angels, post military, a former wingman of yours, you and Mr. John Foley, team up and start doing some speaking together. So, talk a little bit about how that came to be. And once again, you and John had known each other from time being wingmen together, but talk a little bit about that opportunity.
Well, this is going to be one of those second chances things. I was flying for FedEx and I had a medical situation. Frankly, and this is a longer story that I'll save you from it, but I probably should have died from this cardiac arrest I had. So that took me out of flying, and that was, I still had the ambition to do other things. So and I don't mind speaking to the public. I kind of enjoy that, and I developed my own little program, but I couldn't get off the ground with it because in public speaking, you really have to have a network and a some group that can and sponsor you, right? And I knew John Gucci Foley was doing that, so I called him and I said, "Hey, Gooch, what does it take? What do I need to do to get on the speaking circuit? Because I wanted to do something." Um, so he said, "Well, boss, this is what you need to do." He says, "Really hard." He said, "But why don't you come and work with me?" And I said, "I would love that, and he gave me that opportunity probably 8 years ago now, maybe longer. And we developed that friendship again. He was my wingman on my Blue Angel team, right? So luckily I treated him well, so he treated me well. And off we went, and I got onto the speaking circuit, and here we are.
How amazing. I love it. And now, additionally, you mentioned, hey, opportunities maybe present themselves, but you also pursued them. And so, producing a film, talk a little bit about the movie that you're getting to help, put together here.
Right. Yeah, that was something. Rob Stone and I, when we took the team to Russia on one of my teams in the '90s, I thought we've got to chronicle this historic Moscow air show, right?
Yeah.
And Rob Stone was a young child actor, but had developed as he grew. He developed his own production company, and I was looking for somebody to do this, and I found Rob after a long search, and he said, "I'll do it, boss." That's what they called me on the team. "I'll do it, boss." And he did it. He came with us, on a shoestring, no big funding budget or anything like that. And he created Blue Angels around the world at the speed of sound. And an award-winning documentary, the 90 minutes, on A&E and then Discovery, and he just did a fantastic job. So anyway, that gives you the background of our relationship.
Yeah.
So about 4 or 5 years ago, I called Rob and said, hey, look, the Blue Angels are going to start flying a new jet on their 75th anniversary, which now was 2 years ago. And it is their 75th. So why don't we do a documentary? And he said, hey, that sounds great. So we pursued that. We got some big corporate sponsors interested. And then the coronavirus hit and everybody kind of shut down. And it shut down for a while. I met up, though, when I did a keynote with the crew of Devotion, a movie that was being made in Eastern Washington, partially and some on the West Coast, further on the West Coast. And I met Kevin LaRosa, who did all the aerial coordination for Top Gun Maverick. And he had done that. Now he's doing Devotion, the movie Devotion. And I gave him a keynote and he said, what are you up to now? And I told him, and he said, look, there's a fellow that was in Top Gun Maverick, Glenn Powell, who played Hangman in that movie. He said he loves the Blue Angels. He grew up with a poster on his bedroom wall. He said, I'll hook you up with him. And by that connection, we were able to go to the creative artist agency in Hollywood and find somebody to pay for it and somebody to distribute it. The company that wanted the project was IMAX, and IMAX has taken it on. And the company that is producing it and will make it stellar is Bad Robot, who is led by Hannah Minghella and more notably J.J. Abrams. So J.J. Abrams is one of our producers. Wow. Glenn Powell, one of our producers. We have several others. They allowed me to be designated as an executive producer. I think because it was kind of my idea, I guess. But and I've been involved with all that production activity over the last year and a half. And now we're finally into editing. We call it post-production editing, music, color fixes, and things like that. So we're gonna get it out soon. I was hoping Christmas, but it looks like it might be in the spring. But that's another one of those. Jump out there, I think you can do something. Get after it and have fun with it. And I did. I just had a ball with it.
I absolutely love it. Well, good. And now, once again, you're doing a lot of speaking in different places. And to your point, speaking, one, it's tough to get your foot in the door. But two, it's then you have to have a message that relates and resonates with folks. And so, I know just with your career, you have a breadth of knowledge and just different areas you can go. But, are there any, important points that, you like to highlight that we haven't already discussed today? I know a couple of them we've already brought up just in our dialogue, but any important points that you like to make sure to talk to groups about in what you speak about today?
Yeah, well, I took my the business part of the keynote from John Foley. He had some really great folks working with him. They created this model, this diamond performance framework. And I've taken that and I key in on that. But in the build up in my keynotes, I talk about my challenges, that I wasn't out of the country club set, right? I had things that were really not going well in my life, and no opportunities were knocking. People weren't knocking at my door. I had to go out and knock on their door, right? So I think go back to your question again. How did I approach these opportunities? Tell me again, Bill?
No, just how do you approach these opportunities? But then also, are there any main points that you like to talk about that we haven't discussed today that you just like to share with the group?
Yeah, when I do my keynotes, thank you for refreshing that. When I do my keynotes, I cover these things that make a corporation or a team or even individuals better, how they can achieve a higher level of performance and excellence. But I also preface that with the challenges I had and the second chances I had and the things that made me humble. I'm just an average guy, but I was able to embrace things based on bringing people around me that would help and help and encourage me. So that's, make good relationships, build trust with people. And then when you have that trust, you can present these things to your trusted advisors, if you will, your friends, and see what they say. And maybe they'll have a way to help you along with those goals, those dreams.
I love that. And I love what you said about consistency. I think, so frequently we feel like we have to be the best at something before we're ready, or we have to be the most talented to be considered. And the reality is that sometimes people are just naturally better at something than you off the bat. But
Right.
if you're consistent and you show up and you put in the effort, you can get there too. And oftentimes you can exceed where somebody that maybe
Yeah.
had more natural talent than you did because you put in the time and the effort. And so I'm glad that you really honed in on consistency and how important that is.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, it is. Consistency is what earns you trust too. And trust is the big building block for any relationship and any team to excel. You got to have that level of trust, and don't break that. Don't fail in that.
I love it. Well, Greg, I want to say thank you for sharing your story and just the pivotal moments that have led to where you're at. And I'm excited for one, the movie to be coming out, but two, when movie number two happens, we'll have to do this again.
Absolutely. This was a blast, Bill. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Uh-oh. Are you there?
Yep.
You just kind of wrapping it up? Okay.
Yeah. That was great, man.
And you'll put out there how people can get in touch. That's